This episode of Ask the Jegna is brought to you by Recovering from 2020 using the 12-step model to process the year of 2020 by Nicola M. Hurst. This book is for you. 2020 has been a hard year for many of us for many different reasons, and we all need a little help to assist us with moving forward. Let me tell you a little bit more about this book to help you make the right decision, to get it, to help you recover from what one crazy year that we experienced. So Recovering from 2020 was written to help you take each step of recreating your life by using tools that you already have in your mindset. Using this 12-step model, Recovering from 2020 is tailored to help you approach the shifts, changes, and losses of 2020. It is written to help you take the painful moments and find resiliency. Along with the steps, Recovery from 2020 outlines the difference between normal grief and complicated grief, with a message to move through grief into resilience. Don't be afraid to reach out and get a lot of help. Too many people were suffering in silence before 2020, and many people are suffering in silence now. 2020's impact does not have to have a lingering impact on your life that keeps you stuck. Go ahead and get the book. The links are in the description of the video. You can get this book in either ebook format or paperback. Don't be afraid. $15, $10, $5, whatever you can contribute, whatever level you can purchase this book, it will make an extreme difference in your life. Check it out. Now let's get into the show. Greetings, everybody. Good evening. I am your host, Brandon Jones. This is Ask the Jegna. We are back at our regular scheduled time. We had a earlier show today, so we're back doing doubling up since I missed last week. Doing some redecorating of this office space, making it a much more welcoming space for content creation, trying to make a little YouTube studio, expanding. So greetings, everybody, and welcome back to the show. As you can see, the background is a little bit different. It's not 100% done just yet, but there's plenty more content that will be coming into my page and more shows. So just so you know, some of the plans that I have for my channel, I am planning to have a show starting with Brother Aaron, who's been featured on Ask the Jegna several different times. We're going to have a show dedicated to manhood and masculinity and issues of that nature. That should be hitting you all before the end of this month as we continue to plan, prep, and produce that actual broadcast. I started a podcast with Sam Simmons, who many of you know has been kind of like my mentor, my Jegna, who's entered me into this world of dealing with trauma, showing me the ropes and just soaking up his wisdom. We started a podcast called the Healing Brothers Podcast, and you can find that at Healing Brothers YouTube channel. We also will be together tomorrow on Brother Greg West's show, or it won't be published tomorrow because I don't think it's going to be live, but we're going to be recording a podcast with Brother Mr. Greg West, and yeah, it should be pretty good. So if you haven't subscribed to the Healing Brothers channel, I'll make sure that link is posted in the comments for y'all folks later. And I'll be chopping up episodes of that and posting them here so you can catch glimpses of what that podcast is about. And then also you'll be seeing Ask the Jegna here every Monday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Everybody forgets the Mountain Standard, but I know I have people who are connected to me in the Mountain Standard Time zone, and then ultimately 5 p.m. on the West Coast. So those are going to be the three main shows here on the Brandon Jones Jegna Institute channel. And then also I'll be dropping pre-recorded videos from time to time as well. I have 2 articles that I want to cover this week, so just be on the lookout for those videos as well. So more content is coming. I'm going to keep building this thing out. I want to thank you all for rocking with me thus far. I know I don't have a whole bunch of subscribers, but that's not the goal. The goal is to get constructive information out there so we can improve our lives for ourselves and for the young ones behind us. So yeah, that's the big thing. That's the big thing. So we're going to keep it rocking and rolling. Now, earlier today, I did a show and I asked a question about how are the children doing? How are the children doing? There's an African proverb that talks about you can tell the state of a clan or of a people by how the children function. And that always stood out to me when I learned that, because when I look at Black children, hell, when I look at many children in the United States, I think there's a lot to question, to be curious about, as far as how are our children doing? What else can we be doing for our kids so they live a better life, period? And I see so many Black children who have so much genius, so much creativity, so much potential that doesn't get ignited because they're in environments that don't support or encourage them to be their best, to grow. And I want to try to do everything that I can to connect with as many young people to help them flourish and grow and reach their fullest potential. As I stated plenty of times, I've been a manager of programs. I've had clients as a therapist where I've seen these young people just have so much genius, so much promise, and just so much creativity and things that can contribute to their lives being successful, but they're in bad situations. They're in bad, family dynamics. They're in just bad cities, bad communities that aren't helping them flourish and grow. So I like to, do as much as I can to help reach that level to the best of their ability. Shout out to Mr. West. I see him in the comments. Shout out to my cousin Jermaine. It's good to see you, sir. I know you're doing well. Happy 2021 to you. So Mr. West said the show will be airing Thursday on his channel at 7 p.m. So me and Sam Simmons will be doing a podcast there. But tonight, we're going to be talking about the inner child wounds. Now, this is something that has been a growing topic over the last, I would say, probably 4 or 5 years. I've been hearing this term. And this term stems out of the world of dealing with trauma. For those of you that are not familiar, historical trauma, intergenerational trauma has been a point of focus in many educational settings, nonprofit settings, educational institutions. So when you're going to college and things of this nature, and really looking at the adversity that goes on amongst young people and how that leads to various different social ills later in life, physical health issues, mental health issues later on in life when there's that adversity present. So what has ended up happening is we have gotten to a point now where we've informed and educated so many people on adverse childhood experiences that we need other things to kind of explain it and to understand and to learn about. Even though everybody hasn't heard of these things, the field has gotten to a point where it's kind of hit a stalemate as far as learning. So it started off with the ACE study, and I talked about this in a previous broadcast, but the ACE study is Adverse Childhood Experiences, which was a big study done in the late 1990s by 2 medical doctors, Dr. Anna, Dr. Folletti. They teamed up with the CDC, so the Center of Disease Control, and they teamed up with the premium insurance company, Kaiser Permanente, and they surveyed over 17,000 participants around childhood trauma. And that ultimately, that research became what we now know as the adverse childhood experiences. But what they missed on that was they missed the cultural dynamics within trauma. They missed it. They didn't, because almost 70, I think it was close to 77% of those 17,000 participants who took that survey were white folks. And they were middle-class white folks. So they just missed the whole dynamic of other people who are not white in there, and our adversity. And even some of the questions didn't even touch on some of the things that we know cause detrimental impacts in our community. Therefore, there have been people who try to make more of an urban ACEs and things of that nature and replicated this study. And the results remain true, that when you have people who come from poverty, when you have people who are dealing with racism, when you have people who have all these issues in the community, what ends up happening is various different social ills, physical ills, and mental health ills moving forward. And ultimately, that gets to this point where we're at now, where we've had so many people who have that level of understanding of trauma that we need different ways of talking about this and actually start talking about the healing process. So one of the things that has come from that has been epigenetics. Epigenetics is the study that looks at the old question of, is it nature or nurture that influences the development of a child or the development of a person? And what epigenetics says is it's actually a combination of both. And there's genetic markers that are passed down from one generation to the next. One of those bigger genetic markers being stress and trauma. So that ended up being this newer field that we know now as epigenetics. There's also been another focus area of ACEs, which they called adverse community experiences. So they're looking at communities that have high pollution, communities have increased violence in the community, increased police presence, extreme poverty, not a lot of development, and they're saying that those things have a detrimental impact on the development of children. So when there's not a lot of resources in communities, we know that those children don't end up faring the best. So then that's another area. But then there's been this additional area that is brought up that's called this healing the inner child, which we're going to talk about tonight. And ultimately, what healing the inner child is, those experiences that children have when they're young, those negative experiences, whether it's because of their parent or not, they end up having a detrimental impact. And that detrimental impact starts to show up in their behaviors, in their cognitive ability, so their thinking, and in their feelings later on as adults. And without proper intervention, without therapeutic intervention, without awareness, which most people don't have, what this ends up leading to is issues in their lives. So they have issues in the workplace, they might have issues at school, they have issues in their romantic, intimate relationships, they have issues with their own parenting if they're parents themselves, and then they ultimately have issues with their families and friends. So it starts to have these impacts in several different areas of your life. So at this point, I'm going to share 4 of the main areas of healing the inner child. I'll talk about each one. I might give some examples. I'll try to give an example for each one, and then I'll open it up to see if anybody wants to come on and discuss it tonight. If not, no worries, no pressure either, but just in case people do. So let me share this real quick. So this is a graphic from Jake Woodward, who talks a lot about this inner child wounds. And he talked about these 4 kind of main areas. He talked about the abandonment wound, he talked about the guilt wound, he talked about the trust wound, and the neglect wound. Now, these things don't happen in vacuums. A lot of times, if you have one, you probably have a combination of others. Some of them may affect you more than others affect you based on your personality, based on your level of resiliency, based on the supports that you had growing up, etc. Those wounds might not show up in the same manner, but they can all 4 be present, or one can be more present than the others can be. And this might not be true for everyone who has a traumatic history. Like, that's another thing that we got to keep in mind, is that just because you've had something traumatic happen doesn't mean you automatically will have these types of effects or these types of situations happen to you due to the trauma that you've experienced. But it is important for us to understand that when trauma is present, these things are highly probable. Like these things can happen quite easily. So let's talk about them. So let's go first with abandonment wound. So with the abandonment wound, what ends up happening to people is they start to feel like they're left out of stuff, right? They have fears of being left, like people just leaving them, disconnecting from them. They hate being alone. They are more prone to be in codependent relationships. They hate threats to leave, or they even use threats to leave as a way to remain connected with people. You see this in dating relationships where you have that dysfunction and someone's like, I'm gonna leave you. Well, what is that about? What does that say? Well, you ain't gonna be the same if I leave. That's an abandonment wound coming through that individual. They normally attracts emotionally unavailable people. This is funny because I know somebody who's having issues dating and they're in the same gender relationship, and they are always dating somebody that is emotionally unavailable. But they know this. They get into this dynamic with these individuals, and usually it's purely just a sexual relationship. And then what ends up happening is I'm laughing because it's like I tell this person this all the time. But what ends up happening is once they get over that romantic honeymoon phase of the sex being exciting, etc. They want more out of the relationship, and they knew the other person didn't, because the way that they engaged each other originally was just on a sexual level. Like, it was just like, let's hook up. That's pretty much what it was. But this person always gets themselves in this dynamic where they want more, but they don't engage in the relationship from the beginning from a place where they should get more, or that they're even intending that they want more. They engage in a hookup kind of manner. So they end up attracting these emotional unavailable people because there was no emotional connection to begin with. That was never the intent. And this person who has abandonment issues with their parent, I was able to connect this a dot for them a little, a couple years ago, but they didn't want to listen to me because I'm their friend. And I'm not their therapist, but I try to point those things out. Yeah, you definitely get stuck in a loop because you're always trying to fill an emotional hole with things that are not the appropriate things to fill the hole with. So you may do it through sex. You may do it through seeking attention. You may do it through spending money, right? Buying new things, going on trips. You're trying to fill a hole with the wrong material to fill that emotional hole because you have abandonment issues. So you always want a new setting or a new material or a new item to make you feel good because you're afraid that if you maintain a strong connection, that things will disappear on you. They will leave. And that's a big struggle for a lot of people. But what ends up happening? Those people end up in a lot of codependent relationships where it's not a give and a take that's mutual. It's, you need me for this, I need you for this, and now I'm in a bad, unhealthy relationship. So that abandonment wound is very, very hard. It's a very scary place to be in because a lot of times those people end up lonely long term, and they end up in very unhealthy situations and dynamics and can be manipulated because they're so used to being abandoned. It actually reminds me of a mental health disorder. So for folks who are not familiar, there's this book called the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, and they're in the 5th version of it. That's the mental health Bible, so to say. And in that, there's another definition. There's a diagnosis called reactive attachment disorder. And you see reactive attachment disorder being diagnosed to people who've been in foster care, people who've been adopted, people who've just been disconnected from their primary caregivers or their parents. That's not an uncommon diagnosis for those folks to get. And the reasoning behind that, the reason why they end up with that diagnosis is due to that lack of connection early on, that abandonment that took place early on. They didn't get the lap time from their parents like they should have, and it ended up leading to them having these relational problems. And some of the criteria for that, or some of the symptoms of reactive attachment disorder, also known as RAD, is people have hard times regulating their emotions. They have hard times maintaining close relationships, or on the extreme end, they will form strong bonds with people very quickly, which makes them they're more likely or highly more probable to be in manipulative relationships. They don't form trust very well. So either they don't trust people at all, or they trust them way too much. And they're usually dysregulated. And ultimately, a lot of those folks end up doing better alone instead of connecting to other people because of that abandonment issue and having those struggles of not having that secure attachment as a child. And this is very, very important. When babies are born, there's a reason why the doctor or the midwife or the doula takes the baby out of the womb and puts it onto the mother's chest right away, because it forms that kinetic bond right away. There's a reason for that. And when that doesn't happen, when you have C-sections and they take your baby and they put it in a little carriage and then they're hooking things up to it and you're still laying in the bed in pain, that baby right there at that point doesn't have that universal connection to the mother. And that's so important. And you end up seeing babies who are premature, babies who have, all types of issues. They end up having these relational issues in a couple of years due to not forming that kinetic bond right away. But I'm not going to get too metaphysical today, but these are things for us to consider and think about when we talk about healing these inner child wounds. Let's talk about the next wound, guilt. So the guilt wound, here are just some symptoms of the guilt wound. So feels sorry or bad, doesn't like to ask for things, uses guilt to manipulate people, is afraid to set boundaries, normally attracts people who make them feel guilty, right? So their whole disposition on connecting with people is around guilt. Where do you see this? You see this with a lot of people who have issues with like their weight. They have insecurities about how dark they are or how light they are or their hair texture, right? You have this guilt around there. And what ends up happening? You see this in families where you might have, everybody in the family's skin tone is like, kind of a browner skin tone. And then one of the kids is turned up light skin. And now they got a guilty issue of that. Or you got a whole bunch of light skinned folks in a family dynamic, you the dark skinned person. And you tease because you dark skinned, or you tease because you light skinned, or you might have red hair. You're the only one with red hair in the family. And you tease from that. It's actually develop these guilt wounds about who you are and how you show up in the world. And what ends up happening is a lot of those people start to utilize that guilt and that insecurity that is developed over time to their, I would say not their advantage. Now they're using it like thinking that it's their advantage, but really it's to their disadvantage, because they're using that and they're not able to form healthy relationships with a lot of people because that guilt gets in the way. And then they start to question themselves and their own abilities. And you start to see things show up like, in their workplace situations or in their intimate relationships or their friendships, where they're always suspicious about what someone's thinking or what someone's doing, right? And they're thinking that, okay, it's because of this, it's because of that. And they can't set healthy boundaries because they're so dysregulated themselves about who and how they are and how they show up in the world. So that guilt wound is a crazy one. And it ends up being one of those things that's more of a self-fulfilling prophecy, because it's really you, how you feel about yourself and the things that you're dealing with, that is the struggle. So the next wound is the trust wound. Now the trust wound is, here are some symptoms of it, right? So the person is afraid to be hurt. Most people are afraid to be hurt, but this is an extra level to it. So it's hard. I don't want to be hurt, so I'm not going to give in as much. I'm not going to lean into anybody. I'm not going to trust anybody 100% because they're going to ultimately end up hurting me, right? So they doesn't even trust themselves. So they even start building a wall around themselves. So what happens when you don't trust yourself? You don't believe in your abilities to do things. You don't take risk. You stay in a comfort zone. You're not able to grow fully. You don't get different exposure to new things. You just kind of stay in a container, and you remain in that container because that's what you know. That's your comfort zone. So it's hard for you to develop and grow when you have that trust wound. You find ways not to trust people. This is a crazy one too, because when you're finding ways not to trust people, somebody can be a really good person. They can be down for you, be a really good friend, really good coworker, really good partner. Like they could just be a good person to you. But since you have trust issues, you don't let them in and you miss a lot of your blessings. I see this a lot with a lot of women, to be honest. A lot of women that are in my generation, millennials, professional Black women for the most part, they're in their early 30s. They have trust issues for many different reasons. But what ends up happening is when they find somebody that could be a good partner for them, they don't allow that person in. They don't trust that person enough, and they end up passing up on that person, and they end up moving on because of their own insecurity and the things that they've been through around trust. And then what happens? 2 or 3 years later, that person found somebody else. They got married. They started a family, and now here go one of my friends, with the egg on their face, wondering what happened and why that couldn't have been them. And it's like, well, got to deal with that trust wound. That trust wound will leave you single for a long time, unfortunately. So feels insecure and needs a lot of external validation. I ain't gonna pick on women right now, but it's the same thing starts to show up. So what do you see here? You start seeing, I'm gonna go on a trip every year, several times a year, and I'm gonna build my self-care. I mean, I see this stuff on Instagram too all the time. It's like, it's all this external stuff to make you feel whole inside. That is not the most healthy way to develop. Now, in men, it looks a little different. Because we got holes too that we be trying to fill when it comes to the trust. With men, it's usually more in an isolation format. I don't trust nobody. I gotta get out here and get it on my own. And then what ends up happening is we burn out. We run out of abilities to do things because we are trying to be these one-person armies, and we can't be a one-person army. And what ends up happening is we shut down, we crystallize our emotional capacity. So we don't allow ourselves to feel anything. We isolate ourselves from everybody. We end up burning up all our money because they're trying to buy all this stuff to make us feel good or make us appear like we are good to other people, right? It's all status driven. And we end up isolated, alone, and frustrated and grumpy. So it's one of those things that ends up happening over and over and over again. So that trust wound is a dangerous trap. You got to be very careful of that one. Most people don't feel safe. Now, as a Black person, many of us don't feel safe for many different reasons. But when it comes to trust wounds, what ends up happening is even when you are in a safe as enough situation, environment, relationship, whatever, what ends up happening is you're always ready for things to go left. So you don't feel comfortable enough to just be. And when you have that level of anxiety, it starts to have a toll on your stress levels. It starts to have a toll on your anxiety levels where you're always looking for things to go left. You're always willing to just, to stop doing something instead of fully investing because of that fear that things are not safe enough. And then ultimately, they normally attract people who do not feel safe as well. So again, like can attract like, and you can seek out folks who you feel understand you or who you feel get your experience. And those two people, if they ain't doing their healing work, they're not, on their journey to being better. What ends up happening is more problems. So again, this is something that we have to keep in mind, that trust wound is a very dangerous one. And then we get to the neglect wound. Right. This was mine. I'll be the first one to admit the neglect wound is one of those things that I have struggled with for a long time. Now I've gotten a lot better with it, but I ain't gonna lie to you. It's still a work in progress, which is why I always talk about healing being a journey and not a destination, because you can, quote unquote, I don't believe you can heal these wounds. I believe you can progressively work on them, but over time, these wounds may show up differently at different points of your life. So you always have to be working on yourself, working on these wounds so they don't interrupt your path to greatness or your path to success and your ability to utilize what you need to utilize to live a good, healthy life. So the neglect wound struggles to let things go, right? Struggles to let things go. I'm a Cancer. Now, some people say this might go to my horoscope as well. I'm a Cancer, and I don't let things go. like you cross me, we done. I don't go backwards. Like we done. And I would like some reconciliation on some of the things that are done. But if I don't get it, I'll live with it and I'll keep it pushing. Like that's just how I've always been. When I'm done, I'm done, and that's just what it is. That's what it's been for me for a long time. Like I'm thinking about somebody that I know. This is a family friend. I know her very well. We've known each other from a professional standpoint, and there was a point in time on a work level where this person just literally threw me under the bus and played dumb. And I understand why they played dumb. They played dumb because their boss was in the room. But their boss had an issue with me, and I had to professionally check their boss, and I looked to them to support what I was saying because they knew what really happened, but they didn't. They played dumb, and then they made it look like I was the one who had an issue. And I was like, wow, I can't believe we know each other. You know my family, I know your family, and you play me in that situation. I would think you would have my back, regardless if that was your boss or not, but they completely threw me under the bus. Since that moment, I have not talked to that person, and I've been in similar circles with that person and everything, and I have left that person alone. And I know that's due to my neglect wound, and my neglect wound comes from my father, right? My biological dad, because I didn't grow up with him. So to me, that's just a complete disconnect. So for me, it's very easy for me to cut off relationships that I don't deem to be useful for me anymore, because I've learned how to do that with my biological dad. He can exist, I can exist, and it's easy for me to just disconnect. And I've always maintained that for myself. What's up, Brian? And what's up, Michelle? Welcome to the broadcast. Hey, Aaron, welcome back as well. Hope you are all doing well. We are talking about the inner child wounds tonight. And right now we're talking about the neglect wound. So let's go down this list a little bit more. has a low self-worth. That's something that I haven't really struggled with that much. I mean, I think there's been times where I've doubted my abilities to do things, but my self-worth, I haven't really struggled with that. Gets angry easily? Absolutely. I definitely can get pissed off real quick about something. And then that leads to me cutting off stuff. Like I'm just done with stuff. And that's one of the things that I really had to work on. Because I internalize my anger. You ain't gonna see me, cussing people out and punching walls. Now I have done those things, but I know I can get super angry. Now I used to have, and I've learned to channel my anger through football. So I used to be a pretty good football player. I didn't play college football. I could have, but I didn't. And I remember when it was game time, I used to try to hurt people. And I would try to hurt people because that was the only acceptable outlet where I knew I could physically lay out some punishment on somebody and I wouldn't get in trouble for it. And I would just literally just lay folks out. So then when I got to college, when I didn't play football no more, I had to figure out another way to deal with my anger. And really what I would do was just bottle it up, or I would just disconnect from people or things that would make me frustrated. And to be honest with you, I didn't get angry a lot in college. I really did. I don't think I really started getting angry again until I was out of school and I was just trying to figure out life on my own and dealing with roommates, dealing with girlfriends and stuff like that. That's the stuff that I started to notice that anger would come back and I would just cut people off. Like it was nothing for me to cut somebody off. Oh man, this is, I said getting angry was one of my biggest ones. That was probably a lie. Struggles to say no. This was a big thing. When I went to therapy, I did therapy for a year. When I went to therapy, one of my biggest discoveries was my inability to say no. And I wasn't assertive. So one of the things that me and my therapist worked on was my ability to be more assertive. And I never realized this. I always thought I was being a good guy. And I talked, and doing the right thing and being a role model as a black man, etc. And I wouldn't say no to nothing. And I would just say, yes, somebody needs something. Sure. I'm right there for you. I got you. And now it's been a huge struggle for me to learn how to balance to say no to some things versus others. Now I've gotten a lot better, but the struggle to say no is huge. Why is that? When you are neglected, when you have been neglected as a child, or you haven't connected with somebody who means something to you growing up, what ends up happening is you want to be included. You want to be involved in things. So that was my way of not being discluded for something. And this is something that I still work on today. So I always say healing is a journey. One of my biggest struggles is not being included. And I'll give you another example. Last year, right when COVID hit, I was a part of a management team at an organization. There was 9 managers on this team. And I remember there were times where managers were having meetings about what should happen, and I wasn't being included in the meetings. And I was getting pissed. I was like, man, what the hell's going on? Like, why ain't they including me? What's happening? Like, I thought we were all on the same page. And I don't know why they weren't, but it was an issue. It was a problem. And I made it known that it was a problem. And then in certain environments, especially in nonprofit environments, as a man, especially as a black man, if you point out the obvious that something ain't right or something needs to get fixed, you become an outcast. You become a problem. And then they start pushing against you and getting you out of there. And I was just like, well, I want to know, why am I not being included in these conversations? And I'm getting information afterwards. And it was a bunch of other stuff, but this is the things that end up happening. So learning to say no is more about people not feeling included in things that they feel deemed to be included in. And that's a big struggle. Repressed emotions. Now, as a black man, I repress my emotions almost automatically because I've been conditioned to not have emotions. To not express my emotions in many different ways. Typically for black men, the only place that's safe for us to be emotional is in sports. That's when we should show our passion and things like that. But even still, we should be careful in how we do it, right? Just like what we seen a couple years ago with Richard Sherman, who's a defensive back, and at this time, I believe he was on the Seattle Seahawks. And it was after the game. It was the Seattle Seahawks. He was part of the Legion of Boom. And after the game, he's being interviewed by a woman by the name of Erin Andrews, a white blonde woman, tall, all that good stuff, right? She's a sideline reporter. And he was just pumped up and he was screaming. He's like, yeah, we got to go. Let's go. He's like, I did. He was doing what men do after a big game win, after we do things. I mean, men do it when they don't even play sports. A fight happens, somebody gets knocked out, we scream and yell like we knocked the person out. That's a part of who we are. That's a part of our nature. But what happened was the next day on ESPN and Fox Sports, they're talking about Richard Sherman was threatening this woman and he was out of control. And it was nothing like that. But that's how the media spun it, because this white woman got startled. So again, as a black man, we have to repress our emotions in some situations because we get deemed a threat or dangerous or things of that nature. And then on the flip side, in the community, what ends up happening is we have to repress our emotions, because if we get too emotional, we get picked on and we become a target. So it's a both sides of the coin type of thing for us when it comes to repressing our emotions. But it's very easy to repress your emotions when you've been neglected, because you're not supposed to feel that neglect. You're not supposed to process that emotion. The fear of being vulnerable. And again, I'll use the context of myself. Right? As a black man, being vulnerable in some of our communities is a life or death situation. So vulnerability is something that we don't tap into. But the strange part about it is you have to be vulnerable to grow. You have to let your guard down to accept new experiences, new people, new information to a certain extent. But we have built such a hard exterior that it's hard for us to even do that. It's hard for us to open up and even entertain something new or different in our lives because of how we've been conditioned to understand vulnerability. But vulnerability for black men, to be honest with you, is probably one of the keys for us to evolving and being better men just in general. I would say for black people, period, but especially for black men, because our vulnerability has been used against us to keep us down, to keep us oppressed. And I don't want to make us seem like these ultimate victims, but that's just the truth of the matter. And if you need any further evidence on that, check out Dr. Tommy Curry's book, The Man Not. It's very, very important. So that fear of being vulnerable is huge. Normally attracts people who don't appreciate them or make them feel seen. And again, I don't have too many issues around this that I'm aware of, maybe. But this is what you see with a lot of folks who end up getting around people seeking validation from those people, seeking acceptance from those people, right? And a lot of times what ends up happening is those people reject them and make them feel the way they felt when that inner childhood wound was introduced to them. So it's very important to understand that the type of relationships that folks who struggle with the neglect wound, they'll end up in relationships that are unhealthy. So again, the 4 wounds, and these are just 4. I think there's more than 4. These are just some really common ones. We have the abandonment wound, we have the guilt wound, we have the trust wound, and then we have the neglect wound. And like I said, these wounds, I mean, you can have all 4 of these, depending on how you grew up, where you grew up, what happened to you. You can have all 4. You can have one. You might not have any, but you still have significant trauma. But it's important for us to understand these inner childhood wounds have to be worked on. The healing process and the healing journey for these wounds have to be worked on for us to continue to develop and grow. As I've said on many different broadcasts, and I'll say it here, I'm not a person who believes in heal. I don't believe you can heal these wounds. I think these are eternal wounds. But I do believe that you can begin healing from them and working on them where they don't become problematic in your feeling process, your intellectual process, your ability to think, and in your behavior. You can work on them. They might not be healed, right? Not having your father or your mother around, you might not ever heal from that. You know, coming from addicted parents, you might never heal from having parents who had addiction. Being sexually assaulted, molested, or raped, you might not heal from that. Being incarcerated when you're 12, 13, 14 years old, you might not heal from those experiences, but you can get on a healing journey to deal with those things. And that's very important, right? So keep in mind, when you see inner child wounds, when you see people talking about this on YouTube and Instagram, etc., they're gonna frame it for you in a way of saying you need to heal from this trauma, and then they're gonna throw a product at you or a service at you for you to heal. But the thing is, you got to remember, you can't heal from these things, so to say. Now you can disrupt them from coming into the next generation, so that if you want to talk about heal, you can heal the next generation so they don't have those same experiences as you. But when those things happen to you, they happen and they're part of who you are. That should not victimize you, but it's a reality that you have to accept in order to get better. And I've been preaching this on and on and on, because in these spaces of personal development, in these spaces of psychology or positive psychology, on growth, on self-actualization, you're going to have people telling you that you can heal these things. And what I'm trying to tell you is this is not a code. Okay. You can't heal this. This is something that is with you long term, but you can disrupt it from joining the next generation. Why do you feel that no one can heal from trauma? What's up, Coyote? It's good to see you here. Because I think there's things that happen in people's lives that will always be there. If you grew up, like for myself, I grew up in a domestic violence home. I've seen way too much domestic violence, way too much. One time is more than enough. I cannot heal those images of what I've seen. Those things are not going anywhere. I have a different emotional response and a physiological response to them now that I've done therapeutic work and I continue to do the work, but I can't get rid of those things, right? When I hear my name in a particular pitch, like when a man says Brandon and they say it in a pitch that reminds me of my stepdad, my body goes through a physiological reaction. I can't stop it. I know what it is though. So I don't go through a panic mode. My anxiety doesn't rise to a level where I start shaking or sweating. When I was 22 years old, it did. If I was to run into my stepfather just in the middle of nowhere, which I have, like just downtown St. Paul, there he is, anxiety goes through the roof. If I run into him now, I don't have no problems. It is what it is. So to me, that's not healed. It's not over. It's not cured. But I've learned how to work and deal with it. I'm more sensitive to domestic violence at this point in time in my life. I have different type of dynamics and relationships with the people that have been affected by it, but I can't quote unquote heal from it, right? I used to have panic attacks really bad. I don't talk about this often, and most people that are watching us on Facebook that I relate to, they probably don't even know. But in high school and in college, and even as an adult, I used to have night terrors and I would wake up in cold sweats. And what happened was I was pretty much having like sleep paralysis. It wasn't quite sleep paralysis, but I would have these reoccurring dreams of the things that I've seen. Or I'll have like these kind of manifestations of things that I've seen as a kid, but they would just show up differently. Now, the players it was mainly my stepfather, he was always in them. So I would get caught in these dreams. And I used to wake up with my heart just pounding and I'm sweating. And it's like, damn, I'm just stuck and I'm just trapped from that trauma. Now, what did I have to do? I had to work on that inner child wound. I had to disconnect the emotional state from what that pain felt like from then, because I used to wake up feeling like the stuff literally just happened. Like I really went back into my child self and the things that I seen and dealt with and felt as an adult. And it was like I was reliving those traumatic experiences over and over and over. Now, what did I have to do? One, I had to accept those things as realities of my life. Then I had to understand how to control my breathing. I had to understand that this is not a real thing. You almost have to use reverse psychology on some of this stuff to realize that it can't harm you. Now, I'll be honest with you. I used to have panic attacks probably like 2 or 3 times a month back in those days. Now, I might have one a year. I had one in 2020. This was over the summer. And what I do now is if I ever have one, I always journal. So in my phone, I have an iPhone. I go to the notes app. If I ever have a panic attack or if I have a crazy dream, I just go in, hit voice to text, and I just talk it through. Literally, you have to rewire your mindset on some things. I just talk it through. And once I'm done talking it through, my anxiety is down. I'm breathing. Sometimes, depending on how elevated I am as far as the anxiety, I might have to go through a breathing exercise. I'm not sweating or anything like that. And then I just keep it moving, but I don't let those things captivate me. So that's why I say that it's important to understand that you don't quote unquote heal trauma, but you learn how to work through it as you go. Now, for me, the healing process starts with the next generation. So I have to make sure I design a life and I have to deal with things in a particular way where my children don't ever experience it. My kids have no idea what domestic violence is. And I hope that they won't really ever experience it. Now they'll learn about it at some point in time, but my hope is that they will never experience it. They won't experience it as a child. I won't allow myself to get to that level. So that to me is the healing. That's the intergenerational heal right there. But the healing process starts with me doing the work. So hopefully I was able to answer your question, Coyote, for the most part. Absolutely. Definitely subscribe to Brother Greg's channel. Let me drop the link to your channel in the chat here so people know where to subscribe to it, Brother Greg. See if I can figure this out. Give me a second, folks. There we go. So here's Brother Greg West's channel, everybody. Check it out. I'm gonna drop the link too for folks if you want to join here in a second. Let me just make sure I catch up here in the chat. A study was done years ago with a gorilla and a baby doll, and it was a horrible study. StreamYard tonight. Didn't see the link. Yeah, we on StreamYard tonight. I'll drop the link here in a second. Let me stop sharing this. Let me drop the link. So if you want to come on, share your thoughts on inner child wounds, things that you've seen, experiences that you've seen, feel free to come on in. You are more than welcome. I did drop Brother Greg West's channel in the chat, so you should be able to see and utilize that. As well. But yeah, it's important. It's important for us to understand how those experiences that we go through early in life do play a role in our life later on. And they can show up. They can show up spiritually. They can show up emotionally. They can show up physically. They can also show up from an emotional standpoint. And we don't always connect those dots on why we do the things that we do. But a lot of it is based on how we were raised, the environments that we were in, the experiences that we had that turn us out to who we are. And they're not always negative. That's something that I should have mentioned at the beginning. Sometimes the things that we develop over time are things that can be constructive and help us out. Like I talk about myself being very independent. I would say me and my two younger brothers, all three of us are pretty independent men. And I think we learned that as a way of survival from our mom. She taught us to take care of ourselves very well. And one of the things I always talk about is how my mom taught us how to cook. Like she taught us how to. I always joke about it, like we was cooking like actual meals very early on because it was based on survival. She said, "Y'all boys, y'all like to eat. Y'all gonna have to learn how to cook." So we thawing ground beef and making spaghetti and hamburger helper and all types of stuff very young because we had to. And is that a trauma in itself? Maybe. But it's also something that helped us be more independent as we got older, where we didn't have to depend on other people. Unfortunately, like a lot of black males do, they have to depend on women to survive. And that wasn't our situation because our mom put us in a different type of development state or development track not to be like that. But yeah, insecurity is a big thing. I think there was one more thing I wanted to share while we're waiting for people to come on in. Okay. There are some other wounds. Yeah, you didn't want us to depend on nobody. So my mom's in the chat. She didn't want us to depend on nobody. And guess what? That's a good thing. That is not a bad thing. We shouldn't be dependent on anybody. There are so many people who are. And to be honest with you, as someone who's worked with hundreds of black men, the ones who aren't chronically dependent on somebody end up doing a lot better from an emotional development or therapeutic standpoint versus others. All right, we got Aaron. Aaron's going to join us here. What's up, Aaron? Welcome back.
Hey.
How are you
doing? Good. I'm fine.
Good. What's on your mind tonight?
I I think that a lot of us um, have been going through the process of really healing ourselves because of COVID. And I know we don't want to go into the metaphysical or the,
You can go
celestial
ahead.
or whatever. But it just feels like for people that like, because I was talking to in the chat, and it was just like a lot of people in my family, like kind of they know what's wrong consciously, but they don't. They want to keep themselves busy so they can kind of not have to deal. Like they're always busy, and so I feel like COVID kind of put the brakes on a lot of people to really do that work. And if you're not doing that work, it's like levels to it. It's like since COVID was so bad, like it was so bad for some people, but so good for others. Do you know what I
Right.
mean? So I feel like it. I feel like everything that you said was just like it's got to happen. Either you're
Yeah.
gonna do it on your own, you're gonna initiate it, or the universe is gonna push you into that initiation. And if you're getting pushed into it, it's not gonna feel as good as if you did it
Sure.
just took control and did it yourself.
Right.
And so, and I wanted to say too, I'm a Cancer rising. I'm all into astrology stuff. I had a lot of issues letting go too, but
hmm
you got to, or you not gonna
Man, as a Cancer, man, that's probably one of my best traits. It's like you, and it can be a little thing too. Like I don't mess with you no more, and it's okay, and I'm done. Like I don't hate you. It's just we over. It's just like
It's
it's
that
a
crab
wrap.
mentality. You gotta get
Like I don't
away
even
from.
think about you no more. It's just like you. It's like a blip on the radar. It's like I'm out.
Yeah, you go back into your shell.
Yep. Yeah.
Mhm.
And some people think that that that's a bad thing, but for me, it's worked out pretty well. I don't know about for you, but when I'm done, I'm just done. Like I said, I've worked on trying to not be like that because I know that there's been some people that I've been really close with that I've just kind of cut off. So I try to do that reconciliation piece and like figure out like what's happening, what's going on. But if it's not reciprocal, and it's not working both directions, I'm just out. I just cut out.
I mean, do you feel like? Because I feel like I'm like that, but I don't think it's because of the cancer. The cancer makes me more like open to being like, like oh, let's figure it out together. Like what's going on? I think mine is more like because I'm an Aquarius. Like I was born in February, so
hmm
like Aquarius is kind of like I do my own thing anyway.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
if
You
you
go at your own flow. Yeah,
die,
yeah. Got two water signs, man. Yeah. I mean, I think that it can do. I think some of it may do with my horoscope. But I think also it's just my experiences. Like I
right.
said, like that inner child wound of the neglect piece. And
Yeah.
for me, it wasn't like it was more of an absence than neglect. It wasn't there. So for
Yeah.
me, it's very easy to just drop off. I can do it. I can just say, okay, you don't mess with me. Well, I'm out. It is what it is, and I just move on. And
Do
I
you
know
feel
that's
like
not
the
healthy.
people will come back? Do you feel like sometimes that doesn't work for you because they'll keep coming back, or like,
Some people do, and then I'm
yeah,
open to it. But then, so then what happens? And this is the asshole in me. But then what happens is I keep a distance. Like I'll let you back in, but it ain't gonna be the same like it was before. Like we cool, but we ain't as cool as we used to be. And I do have dynamics like that now, where it's like the relationship that I had with that person is not the same that it was before.
yeah.
And I've learned
But
to be
is it
okay with
supposed to?
that. The other person's not always, but yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, but what is it supposed to be? That's the thing. If you're evolving,
It's a good question.
then maybe it's supposed to be different.
It depends, right? If it's a family member, you know, what do we have in our community, right? I mean, we try to keep tight knit families. Even when family hurt us, you should just forgive them and act like nothing happened. But when you are trying to take care of yourself and trying to be in a different or better position, you have to operate different different than you used to. You got to love people from a distance sometimes, and that doesn't feel good because now it makes it look like you acting funny or you being bougie or things like that. We have all these sayings when we're taking care of ourselves and we need to disconnect or re-relate to people in a different manner.
True.
So
This is true.
very interesting. You want to hang on? I got brother Greg West waiting to come on. You want to hang tight, or you want me to drop you off?
Yeah, that's cool.
All right, Mr. West, welcome to the show, sir.
Hey, what's going on? Hey, Hotep,
Not much,
Hotep
man.
family.
Hotel.
Yeah, it was funny. We're in our second week of Felons with a Future class right now, and it's funny that a lot of what we're talking about tonight on the show was what I was talking with our participants. It's funny because when you touched on it, you don't believe that healing you can never be healed, but the healing is an ongoing process, and that's one of the things that I was talking to them about. Like, this is going to be a process that's going to be continuing, because like if we do what we're supposed to, no stone left unturned. Every time I think that I've gotten to a place where, okay, this is the reason why I act this way, there's going to be something underneath that stone too. So it's an ongoing process. And like when you put up those four the four things, man, for the inner child wound, I was like, shit, I feel all of them. You know what I'm saying? Because and
Yeah.
I believe that many of us in our community fit in that dynamics. Because like where we come from, like a lot of us one parent families, even if it was two parent families. Like I know for my first 12 years it was, but I still had that abandonment issue because I was a latchkey kid. You know what I'm saying? So like, boom, there wasn't really a lot of parenting around, so I felt like where they at. The fantasies of while I'm watching TV, because I'm home by myself, me and my brother. I'm being educated or misguided by the television, and now I come to find out that that is not my reality. So now there's that trust wound because, like, I'm like the people who are supposed to be helping me and teaching me, so now I don't feel safe and all of that. I mean, it's crazy. So I felt a lot of it, the neglect, the guilt, all of that, especially like my brother being dark skinned, I'm being light skinned. I was called everything, like vanilla wafer refugee and all, and we're terrible in our community for doing that. The colorism in our community is real bad because, like, will cap on the dude who's dark skinned or in my case because that was a defense mechanism. You know what I'm saying? I had to have something to keep y'all off of me, because if I let you know how sensitive I really was, like you said, being sensitive in our community can be a deadly thing. So it ended up becoming, a defense mechanism. So I mean, man, it's the dynamics of what we go through as a black community, man, is really crazy. And I know Caucasians go through it, but it seems like we have it a lot harder when we have to deal with it inside our community, where we're supposed to be safe. Then we got to go out into the world where we have so much systematic stuff against us, man. So man, I thank you for the work that you're doing. And it was just funny that we were talking about it. And then when you started talking tonight, I said, I wonder how come all this sounds familiar. Then I remembered I'm using your curriculum.
It's all good, man. It's the community's curriculum, man.
Yeah.
It's the approach for us to just keep thinking about these things so we can keep getting better. But yeah, but it's important. Again, you're right, man. Like, we can't get caught in this idea that we will heal and it's gonna be over. Like, I thought when I went to therapy, I thought I dealt with all my daddy issues. Then I became a dad, and all that stuff came right back up. And I was scared. I was like, man, like, I feel guilty that I'm a dad. Like, I was messed up, man. I was like, I need to go back and see what's going on, because it literally just like all hit me at once my baby was here. And I'm like, man, I'm realizing that I don't know what the hell I'm doing.
Right.
I was fathering without a foundation.
Right.
And that scared me, because I'm like, I don't want to ruin this this baby's life. I don't want to mess up. And I didn't have anything to balance that off of. Now, granted, I read all the textbooks. At this time, I was a marriage and family therapist, but that shit didn't mean nothing when that baby's in your arms.
Right.
You got to wipe that butt and get that baby to stop crying. I was scared. And that was the moment where it hit me. It was like, oh, I thought I dealt with my trauma. I did in that time period, but now I have a different life experience, and now it's back.
And you make a good point because like that I'm in long term recovery. So like we had a 12 steps that really help us. But the world don't. You say 12 steps to the general population. They're like, I don't need that. That's what I'm saying. I don't have a problem with drugs or alcohol or whatever. You know what I'm saying. And that's why I appreciate that book that Nicola, just put out, because it really gets you in touch with you can use these things for anything in your life. Because when you were talking about the fatherhood thing, when I was a teenage dad, my oldest son was born when I was 16, so I was messed up trying to be something that I had no clue of. And I will still find that now, even though people telling me that I'm a good dad with my daughter that lives here with me and the one that's on campus now and everything. I still had the same fears that I discovered. I still had the same fears that the first time I held that little boy when I was 16. I still had the same fears, and they resurfaced now with her. But it's because of the work that I've done where I don't react the same way, where I don't let the fear paralyzes me and everything like that. And that's the important thing that we have to address our community, let them know that the healing process is about dealing with those fears and learning healthy ways and productive ways of working through them. You know,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. And accepting those fears
yeah,
and actually being comfortable enough to say that is something that I do fear. Like most people can't do that, and that's why we can't address the issues because we'll just avoid them long term. I'm gonna bring on the other Aaron.
my man's.
Greetings, Aaron. Welcome.
What's up, Aaron? What's up, Brandon? What's up, Greg? How y'all doing this evening?
Hotel.
What's up, man? Doing good.
Yeah, this is a loaded topic because I've been in therapy for the last 6 months. So uh, I don't know if there's another way for us to really tell the community how important all of this mental health stuff is, because I literally think this is going to sound cliche, but as a man thinketh, so he becomes, and literally we're not thinking. Like, we don't have in our communities, we don't have healthy thinking. And so it's almost like when we're looking for different results, but we kind of look at the whole entire picture, it's like we really shouldn't expect anything, because it's like we haven't, as a community, each of us individually done the work. So even Brandon, you putting out this content, it's extremely important, because I can tell you from a parental standpoint, one of the hardest things, and I think it's been pretty known, but I'm divorced, and I don't care what anybody says. I had a conversation with a young lady in IHOP. I was just getting a meal, and she was talking to me. She was pregnant. She said she's about to have a baby in a month. And I asked her, and I said, "How does your husband feel about the baby?" And she said, "Well, she went into her little, he ain't nothing, and I'm be able to make it on my own," and stuff like that. And guys, she got real quiet. I got real quiet, and I said, "Ma'am, my sons are 20 and they are 16." And I said, "I was married." I said, if you talk to any adult that's been on this planet, they will tell you that the lack of a parental figure, either the mother or the father, is going to have an impact on that child's life. And you cannot discount that. Now, how they deal with that trauma, because it is traumatic, because we don't give children the idea of mommy, daddy, family. They see that. That's what's ingrained in them. So and I think in our community, we have to be honest, even us thinking that we can make it, whatever making it kind of means, that we can do this in these circumstances, it's asinine. Like, to me, it's just totally asinine. And then we're not even giving out the proper messages, Brandon, on, okay, these are things to look for when these children go through that traumatic event. I don't care if it's a baby daddy starting off, or what happens, like in my situation, I was married and then there was a dissolution of a family. That's another level of trauma that, one kid deals with it this way, another kid deals with it this way. So, and these are things that are just so important to me, because we just deal with it. And I think that's why Brandon we deal with the trauma because it's almost normal. Oh, you're a baby mama, you're a baby daddy, this is now normal. Right. And we're not even understanding that, no, these are traumatic things that happen. Forget about us as adults that go through traumatic stuff. Can you imagine the brain of a 5-year-old kid, and all of a sudden you wake up one day and your mommy used to be there every single day and they're not there no more? Mm-hmm. How do you explain that? Like, oh, they'll be okay. Really?
Yeah.
Really? Go ahead, Aaron. I know you want to say. Go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, I wanted to say too, I think that it's being normalized. like what we were saying earlier about how like African American or Black culture, even with everything, the negativity and the positivity is being kind of like emerging into American culture. Like they're making it cool to be a baby mama. You got basketball wives, you got all these reality shows that don't honor the family, that don't honor, you know, a two-parent household. And so we have a whole generation of people that are just like coming into a situation that, like what you said with that young lady, we don't know her situation, but if she's talking about him, the father of her child, like that, how do we know that that's not going into the child in vitro? You know it is. Do you know what I mean? Like the child knows. The child has a connection with the father. They say the umbilical cord is like the emotional connection to it. So it's just like if she's talking like that, I mean, my whole life my mother talked like that. And so I didn't get to meet my father's family until I was 27. And it was just kind of like, they were like, where you been? And I'm just like,
right.
my mother like created this monster. So I'm like, why would I come to somewhere if I'm afraid to go there? You know, the person that you depend on to tell you right from wrong is telling you this other half of you, which you're always curious about anyway. So it was just kind of like I had to like sneak around to kind of find out information about him. And then finally, when she passed away, I found out so much more that she wasn't willing to tell me. And it was just like, I couldn't even be mad at him because he reminded me so much of my mom. Like, it was just ridiculous. Like, they were very similar. And it was just like, how could I not love you if I loved her?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So,
yeah, absolutely.
Hey, Brandon, can you talk about real quick about even like whether or not it's single parents or even divorcees, how some of these wounds show up in young children or like teenagers or just the different stages, if you wouldn't mind, maybe?
Yeah. So, I mean, they can look different depending on the age group and what the support systems and environments are like. So, for example, like the abandonment wound. So in a child that's elementary school age, abandonment wound looks like a child who is always trying to assert themselves and be a part of a lot of different groups. Like think about like a fifth grader where socialization is just starting to get kicked up and they're like 9 years old. They're going to try to be in every little friend group. They're going to try to involve themselves. They're going to hop around in all these things because they have that fear of being left out. Right. Okay. So what does that look like for your 15-year-old who's in high school? When abandonment is present, one of the things that ends up happening is what they start getting into unhealthy relationships. So they'll have those friends where they're giving them extra lunch money, or they're letting them borrow their video game, or just letting them have stuff like here, just take it, right, just here. And then you, as the parents, like, man, what happened to that 2K I just bought you? Right? I gave it to my boy. I told him that he can have it because I ain't playing that much. It's like, but that's your game.
Right.
I bought that for you for Christmas. It's February. You already gave it to somebody else. Right. But again, that abandonment piece, they're trying to connect, right? They don't want to be left out. So I'm going to give so people can feel connected to me. Or they'll give them like clothes. That's another thing that you'll see is they'll like, oh, I'll let them borrow my shoes, or oh, I'll let them borrow my shirt. I ain't wearing that shirt that much because they're trying to feel connected. So that's just in the abandonment role. The guilt role, this gets tricky because with young kids, they're not going to express their emotions verbally most of the time. It's very rare for a kid to say, I feel this way about this. They're going to act it out. So a lot of times when you have the guilt wound for elementary school children, they're going to misbehave. They're going to find ways to disconnect from situations. So the teacher may say, sit down, or you may say, stop doing that. And they're going to go do it anyway because that's what they want to do. Because it's like they feel sorry and bad about it, but they can't tell you. So they're going to do some other attention-seeking behavior so that they can feel a particular type of way. Now, what does that look like for an an adolescent kid? So we're talking about like 7th and 8th grade on. Is they start to form relationships that are built on deficiencies. And what I mean by that is they're in a relationship with somebody like, oh, they don't really care about me because of this. They start to try to feel bad about stuff to maintain the relationship, which is a disaster, which leads to codependency and can lead to a disaster because they want to feel guilty. They want people to feel guilty to be around them. They're basing their relationships and their dynamics off an emotion. The trust wound piece is typically kids just don't feel safe around things. So you might see an avoidant elementary school age kid in the trust wounds. Like they don't want to be hurt, so they're just going to avoid things and stay away from things. In a teenager or adolescence for trust wounds, you're going to see kids who are doing stuff like they may, I'm trying to think of a good example of this. Like it's like, for example, it happens a lot with teenage girls. They start to feel a lot of insecurities about their bodies and things of that nature. With boys, the insecurities are usually in their abilities to do things. So you might see a boy who's more mute. He might not talk a lot, but with girls, you'll start to see them changing a lot of things. Like they might wear their hair 3 different ways in 1 week, or they might try to change the way they dress, or they might be a golf chick. They might be in the golf stuff this month, then they're in the anime the next month, then they're Afrocentric the next month, and then they're trying to be a Barbie because they like to listen to Nicki Minaj. Like they just start jumping around because they haven't built any secure attachments anywhere. And then neglect, I think, looks the same across the kind of the developmental stages of a child. Right? The low self-worth. They don't believe in their ability. I can't read, mommy, because I'm stupid, or I can't get this math problem. They give up very quickly. You'll see that throughout the stages of development. And this happens over and over and over again. I think what ends up happening with the neglect part for a lot of adolescent children, though, especially boys, is that they start to tend to lead towards virus. I said virus, too much corona. They start to lead to violence and dangerous things. So they start to get involved into dynamics that lead to like carjackings, stealing stuff, things of that nature due to that neglect wound. Because there's a lot of anger there. There's a lot of pent up frustration. And we know society has a lot of opportunities for them to find outlets to utilize that are not healthy for them. So those will be just some examples for each 4 areas that I would say you could kind of see through various different young people that you may even encounter.
Excellent. Appreciate that.
So I'm gonna pause here. We got LeVar on the line. He's been waiting patiently. Well, what would you like to add to the conversation this evening?
Peace, y'all. Great conversation. I'm just listening, taking it all in, and I'm looking at, which one of these kind of reflect on me. And the most thing that stands out to me the most is the neglect. With that said, I grew up, I was the only child. And my mother, she didn't really know how to be there for me. She didn't really have, I think, self-worth to really know how to help me with schoolwork, to help me to figure out who I am, to properly just, show me love, and her way of showing me love, it was like giving me certain things, spoiling me, and she tried to protect me. If I had a stepdad, back then, I didn't know that he was my stepdad. I thought he was my real dad. And having conversations with my cousin, and he was telling me that she was, it's one time she got into arguing with my stepdad, my mother and my stepdad, and he overheard them say that he's not your son. You can't discipline him, and she wouldn't even hardly whip me, but I was out of control. I was seeking for attention. I was, stealing, I remember one time I grabbed my mom's car keys and jumped in her car. I was like 6 years old, put it in reverse, hit the car and jump back in the house, act like nothing happened. I was, very, into like this, anything I could get into. But fast forward to now and looking at all of that, I have a son, and I'm always trying to do everything for him. I'm always trying to, basically I handicapped him at an early age. And when I got with my wife, she was like, he was what, 5 years old at the time, 6 years old. I'm still like, doing all this stuff that you do for, for a kid at 2, 3 years old. But I didn't know because I got so used to doing it, but I didn't get that for myself. So I started to do all the things and pour into him the things that I feel like I didn't get. And I feel like for me, it was like I was trying to raise my own self over again.
That's real. Can I just add that I had my mom's Acura, and I backed up into her car and ran in the house and did the same thing, LeVar. So you So that nigga, look, my neglect showed up the same way, bro.
Did she find out it was you?
Man, who did this in my car? I did it, man.
I acted like it wasn't even me, and I was the only child, so I was the one who was it? Oh, it must have been him. Man, she whooped me that day, though.
Yeah. I wanted to say, I know you got your butt whooped.
Yeah.
Man.
But I wanted to share something of our real quick, and I want Brandon to step, but
Yep.
Same thing. Got a when I was super spoiled when I was growing up. Parents didn't really parent me, just kind of gave me stuff and was like, I guess they thought that was parenting. You know what I'm saying? And then the crazy thing is that our statute of limitations is over, so I ain't even worried about it no more. But when I was in high school in New York City, there was this thing called boosted. And people used to go in on. So basically in Brooklyn, these kids used to we admired these kids called the low lives growing up in Brooklyn. And they would run up in Macy's and take all the Ralph Lauren and run out. And I remember I met one of the dudes, went to my high school, and I was like, man, he's cool. Like these kids is rocking all this low. It's just a New York City thing, right? And so I was like, okay, now I had money. My parents gave me money, but I was like, nah, I don't want the money. I want to be cool.
You want to be.
So then I decided to just go start boosting, and I ended up getting arrested. I had to go to trial and all this other kind of stuff. And the first thing my dad asked me when he came down to the precinct was, "You had a credit card. Why did you steal the stuff when you had a credit card?" And I almost think it came out of I said, well, I don't know, but now that I think about it, I wanted y'all to see me in any way possible. I just wanted somebody to see me. And this was my version of getting seen because I didn't think that anybody saw me. Even when you're giving me all this stuff back and forth and you think that it's nourishing to me, I still feel neglected. So even if it's bad, I just want you to see me. And I know exactly what you're talking about, LeVar. So I just want to share that. I thought that might be helpful to somebody out there.
That's interesting you said that because I didn't even know, and you connecting those dots for me, and that I actually wanted to be seen because my mom, she worked hard, she worked 9 to 5, came home, cooked, and she wanted to have her alone time after she cooked. She'd go in her room, watch her shows, sit there, eat her food. And me, I was in my room, I had my game system, I had my movies, kind of did my own thing when I was at home, but I was in the streets majority of the time. Early in the morning, I was in the streets. Then when I couldn't find anything to do, I came home and played my game. But it was a lot of alone time. I just had to figure it out. I remember learning how to swim. I'm like, who learned how to swim at 5 years old? 6 years old, and just jump. I'll go to the pool and I'm just watching people swim, jump in the pool, and I just jump in the pool, and before you know, I'm swimming at 5 years old. Nobody's watching me, nobody's monitoring me. So I remember that, and it was like I taught myself so much. I can't remember my stepdad teaching me. He taught me how to drive when I came 16, but so many throughout the years, I learned from other people, and I just kind of implemented certain things. So me, I'm trying to teach my son all this stuff, so he don't have that resentment. Because when I became a teenager, I had a lot of resentment towards my stepdad because I felt like he wasn't there for me. And whenever I did get in trouble, he tried to talk to me. I was like, "Oh, now you want to talk to me? I don't want to hear it now."
Yeah.
Right. So it's a lot of resentment.
I just wanted to add, I think that it has something to do with what you said, Brandon, about that emotional attachment to our mothers when we first come out the wombs and putting the baby on the chest. Because I can see that now with my son. He's 2 years old and he was premature, and they took him away so quick. I was like, "Can I see my baby?" I had to ask them before they took him away. And I see his little personality is "No, I'll do it myself." I'm here for him, I'm showing up for him. But he's so I need that emotion. I need to emotionally take care of myself because he was in the NICU. And even though I was there, it's I wasn't always there. So it was just we would show up and he would have a feeding tube in his nose. He's ripping out the feeding tube. And my husband was like, yeah, because he's like, who the fuck eats a feeding tube in their nose?
Exactly.
He knows that that's not what he's supposed to be doing.
Right.
But if you show up and nobody's telling me, okay, this is the movement for, he's hungry, he wants to feed. And as soon as we get together and he feels close to me, he does. But you could tell it's still that little bit of like, nah, I got it. You know what I mean? And it's just like, damn it.
And you're gonna have to learn how to live with that as a mom, because your natural mother instincts is that's my baby and he's your first.
Yes.
Like that, you're gonna struggle with that as he gets older, because what's gonna happen once he gets 8, 9, 10, he's gonna be like, peace out, mom, peace out, dad. I'm doing me with me and my friends, and you gonna be trying to cling on to your baby as tight as you can. And you're gonna have to really work. This is why I say healing is a journey, because you're realizing that you're seeing that. And that's going to manifest differently over time. And you're going to have to figure out ways for yourself to be okay with that. He knows you're his mom. He knows you. He loves you and you love him. But at the same time, like, that doesn't sit right with you as a mother. Like, just metaphysically is what I'm saying.
Right. It doesn't.
So, yeah, that's.
You're right. Because he shows up when he needs something. He does. But when he is like, I got it, I gotta step back. Like, I just gotta be like, all right, you do, like, and I don't want to, but I do.
Yep. So I shared this, and I'm gonna share the father wounds here in a second. But as I was listening to both Aaron and LeVar sharing, y'all are saying these things without actually saying these things, right? Talk about that self-worth. Like, you're saying you want to be seen. That's talking about your self-worth. That's talking about why you matter. What's significant about you. Talk about that codependency piece, the guilt that you had about, backing up into the Acura and things of that nature. And then the weak bound, those come from that motherhood wound. Those are things that show up. There's other things. These are just some of the main ones. I'm going to show the fatherhood one as well. And then I'm going to get into my teacher mode one more time. And I'm going to show a piece of a slide deck, because I think it's important. Oh, I might have lost the fatherhood one. Hold on one second. I'm going to show a piece of a slide deck to just add more emphasis to what we're talking about today. But these are the fatherhood wounds: having trust issues, feeling like you're not good enough, having additional abandonment issues, and then ultimately abuse. And as I was saying earlier, when Aaron had asked me to go kind of through each one of them and talk about the developmental stages, is what ends up happening for a lot of adolescents, and even sometimes even younger. It's scary when it gets to that. Is that abuse looks different. Sometimes it's abusing yourself. So you might see young people who are cutting, they're self-harming. So they may cut themselves, they may burn themselves, pull their hair out. They may lead into almost like a eating disorder where they don't want to eat certain things, or they do want to start eating certain things. So they start to internalize the anger and the aggression, and even sometimes the anxiety for themselves. And then for boys, it's usually lashing out, right? It's usually lashing out with the abuse. So they might start treating a pet a particular type of way, or a sibling, or they might start talking crazy to their parents, or they might start bullying folks. And girls do similar things as well. But that abuse starts to show up as well when there's that fatherhood wound. And if we think about what do fathers traditionally kind of add to you, and this gets into some Carl Jung stuff and your anima and animus. I'm not gonna get too deep tonight. I can, but I'm not. But when you don't balance those two parts of yourself, your anima and your animus is like your female principle, and your animus is like your male principle. Your parents are traditionally the two people who give you kind of the foundation for those two things. When one is off kilter, you start to see issues pop up on the other end. So when you have fatherhood issues or animus issues, abuse can become something that's very adamant, because men typically do what? They typically help you navigate your environment. That's what men typically do. Women help you cultivate your environment. Men typically help you navigate your environment. This is why when we go to the grocery store, we go to Target or Walmart, we in and out of that thing like it's a SWAT team mission. And most of the time, women, they in there lost in the sauce, man. You go in there for 2 things, come out with 10. That's because of how our makeups are as male and female principal people. but men typically help you navigate that. So we have a route in the store where women are like, okay, I know I'm here for this, but I'm just going to go see what's down in this aisle as well. It's the same type of principle when we talk about child rearing. So I wanted to bring that piece up and add that to this dynamic, because it's important to understand that these aren't things that are always things that are done deliberately to us because we had bad parents. Some of this stuff is just natural human behavior that shows up as culture. So one more thing, and then I'm going to shut up and let y'all talk for the rest of the show. This next thing I'm going to show is something that is going to be in my book once the book is done. This is what I call the universal goal, and I believe that everybody goes through this. So the universal goal is what we all strive to do, and I built this off a kind of a concept from what's called Adlerian psychology or Adlerian therapy. Now, the universal goal has 3 principles. Everybody does this in their own particular way. We all seek security, we all seek significance, and we all seek belonging. So, when we look at some of these wounds and why we're doing the behaviors we're doing, is usually attached to one, if not all 3 of these things right here. So security, most times people think of security, they think about being safe. That's part of it. But really, security is more about being comfortable. This is why in modern, like if you use like a common example, most modern day cars have alarm systems on there, right? So you hop out your car, you hit your little beep, beep, your car is locked. That makes you feel good. But that ain't going to stop nobody from stealing your car, though. Like, we don't think about that, but it's not like just as you got an alarm system, that ain't going to stop them. They'll still steal your car. But it makes us feel secure that we hit that little alarm system and we go about our way. The next thing is significance. This is all about our own worth, our self-worth, like what Brother LeVar was talking about. And what Brother Aaron was talking about, the things that y'all did was about self-worth. You wanted to be that low head and wear that polo and go steal that stuff because it made you somebody. It made you be seen. It gave you self-worth. There's so many young Black kids who are just doing stuff just to feel something, feel a connection with their parents or just somebody to view them and see them, that they're just doing crazy stuff. And they're influenced to do it all throughout social media. It's crazy. Or just media in general. Sometimes even in the communities, they're influenced to do crazy stuff too. But it all leads to the last thing, which is belonging, which is a sense of connection. And so many of us feel isolated. We don't feel connected. There used to be a time in families where people say, we're Johnsons and Johnsons don't do that, or we're Joneses and Joneses don't do that. We're Watsons and Watsons don't do that. There was a place of connection to family. We've lost that because in some families, you got people live in the house and there's 4 to 5 different last names in the house. Like there's this stuff is disconnected and we've lost parts of our universal. We still strive towards these things, but as we strive towards them, there's dysfunctional things that happen for us to get to those 4 things. And then we have what we call falsified security, significance, and belonging. So I'm going to pause there. I know that's deep. I should probably go on that into an actual video to go a little deeper. Any thoughts on any of the things that I just shared?
Yeah.
You're on mute, LeVar.
Oh, okay. Give me just a second.
I can hear you now.
You can hear me now?
Yep, you good.
Okay. Yeah, man, you're going deep with it. When I think about even the first one, security, financial security for me, even though I was, spoiled to a certain extent, like Aaron said, we still struggle, I remember, I had my own room, 1 minute, and the next room, my room was the living room, everybody's room. For so long, as I became an adult, at an early age, 22 years old, when I first kind of, became into adulthood, I found myself taking care of my mom, and she was always kind of struggling. So I always had to make sure that I was good securely. And then as me, fast forward to now, been married for 6 years, I'm always want to make sure we're good. And things don't seem like it's a little low, which is not, if you look at what we got, we're good. But I'm kind of panicking. Okay, I need to do something more. More like, oh no, we're good. So security is important. And thinking about the second one, significance. Being able to identify with your own work, it's a lot, that I really, just trying to understand with that, and trying to understand when it comes to who I am, where I come from, and there's so much there. I don't know if that even goes with that. I'm trying to find something to connect with all of that. But going to the last one, belonging, and going back to the family dynamic, we have a lot of dysfunctionality within our family. And everybody's all over the place these days. But 20 years ago, we was getting together. We felt like a family. And we haven't been getting together like that for so long. But when it comes to my family, I always want to make sure that we all trying to be on the same page. We all are working together. And I love to say, we all are a village, and we all got a part to play. So, I always kind of put that, that African standpoint in it, because I think that is important, and that it's lost within, so many communities. So I don't know if that helped, with all of that. We bring kind of going into that.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. How about for one of the errands? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I can connect all three of them to my journey in motherhood, because as a young person, like what everybody's talking about with the whole like being seen, like I did that in my own way as well, and I was totally against having kids because of my relationship with my mother and not having a relationship with my father. So being a mother was actually very scary for me. And it was just kind of like, I always joked with people, like, they're like, when are you gonna have kids? When are you gonna have kids? And I'm like, no, I'm gonna be that auntie to send your kids to me so I can send them back. Like, I'm not gonna be nobody's mother. Because I was just like very afraid. Because when you become a parent, as much as you don't want your parent to show up, they eventually show up. They do. Because it's just like, that's the person that you saw be your parent. So you're trying to, be this different person and, cultivate it in your own way. But it's sometimes, she'll show up and I'll just be like, hey, man, like, tell myself, like, that's not you. You're not her. You're you, So it was just like this whole journey of just being able to feel safe enough to trust my husband enough and to be comfortable enough to be like, hey, I'm going to have a baby. And kind of too, in a rebellious way a little bit, because people will say, oh, you're not going to have no kids. So I feel like that's the reason why I had my son, because it was just a little bit of a, somebody saying that I couldn't have my son. It was like, okay, I'm going to show you. I'm going to have to go on this journey, because before my son got to me, it was like a 2-year journey of me doing that inner child work, because I was like, okay, I got to get this baby, but I got to make sure I'm good before he comes. And so it was just like changing up everything, like being able to identify my own worth with my health, with my mental health, with, okay, if I don't have a job, are you going to be okay? Like just being comfortable with the uncomfortable, because a lot of people can't be comfortable with the things that hurt them. And it was kind of like my pregnancy, I was so sick that I couldn't, like, I'm like a neat freak. Like I couldn't clean my house the way I wanted to. And it was literally like, I had to sit there and just basically be like, it's okay. You have to go off of what Darius is doing for cleaning up. And I'm like, damn, he ain't doing it right. But it's just like, you gotta be uncomfortable for a little bit. You know what I'm saying? So it was just like, all those things helped me like get past, like my son actually helped me get past some of my childhood wounds, because he kind of forced me to, you know what I mean? Like, and so I do feel a sense of belonging in a way that's even connected to my mother in death, because it's like a lot of things that she went through is like full circle. Like, I'm like, oh. So yeah.
Yeah, I think significance. I think the significance one is I think that's the one that resonated for me, because I can look at myself and I can also look at men. I can just look at men and women, and specifically, I like to use myself as an example, because it's the easiest way for me to be is to transparent, because then I know I'm not BSing around with anybody. So when you grow up in different environments, and like I'm talking specifically about like being around women and dating and things of that nature, if your only interaction is with women and they want to date you, your self-worth is becomes, this person wants to date me. Not that I'm valuable in some other way. Not that I'm pretty smart, not that I'm sharp, not that I have an ability, but oh, this woman just wants to date me, or I'm attracted, whatever these people are thinking, you literally have a distorted view of yourself until you put yourself in an environment to where people, and this is the important part that I had to learn, to where you're around people that not only do you value yourself, but you're also around other people that value those same things that you value in yourself. So when you start to get around more people that are valuing you for your mind or valuing you for your ability and not based on superficial things, now you can look back and be like, dang, I wasn't even in an environment for myself to grow. And the same thing I can say for women. It's that if you're always, New York City is all, to me, it's the most interesting thing because women are constantly being bombarded by men. I want to holler at you, holler at you, holler at you, holler at you. And so if it's a constant, and I think this is just society, if it's a constant imagery of just sexual imagery, constant, your behavior becomes distorted, Brandon, because everything you're doing is going towards that, as opposed to going towards a different level of whatever we call significance. And so I had to, learn that about myself. And then just belonging. I think every person just has that natural desire to want to belong to something, whether it's a group or a family. I think one of the things that I always talk about Dr. Welsing is that learning all this stuff, I think empathy in our families, in our communities is so important, because when you take a real good step back, you realize that everybody is dealing with this on some way, shape, form, or fashion. So you can even look at the person, that crazy brother that's in the family. There's a level of trauma that just hasn't been addressed, and he doesn't even know how to communicate it. But we also don't have the positive or healthy enough environment for he or she to come in and say, this is what I'm dealing with. Because what do we do in Black families? We just beat each other down. Oh, hey, we just beat them down, he or she, and it's not even healthy enough for them to be like, well, I can't even tell you how I'm feeling, because this is the environment that we've cultivated for everybody. You beat up on me, I beat up on you, and nothing ever gets done. So this is powerful, man. Like this is stuff that we should be going over as families and as individuals, like on a constant, daily basis. So
absolutely
excellent, man. Excellent.
Thank you. And you bring up a really interesting point, is us beating up on each other is what we consider love.
Yep.
And if we're not beating up on each other, you don't love me. It's not you're not showing me that you care if you're not teasing me, if you're not calling me out my name, if you're not poking me, pushing me, and things like that. It's almost like in high school. Like in high school, I know when boys have crushes on girls, we always mess with them. Yeah, right? You push her, slap her in the back of the head. I got waves. And I remember when I was in high school, I used to carry a brush around with a handle. I used to pop girls in the back of the thighs with brushes. Now, that's abusive as hell. And I apologize to a lot of the girls I went to high school with, because I know I have left a bruise or two on at least some of them light-skinned girls for sure. Because I used to pop them girls in the back of the thigh. But it wasn't like I was trying to hurt them. That's the only way I knew that, to show you that I cared about you and liked you. I remember one of my early girlfriends, her name's Ashley. I remember one day I seen her after school standing by like the front door, and I went and I put her in like a chokehold, and I was like, you're gonna be my girlfriend by the end of the summer. And and I don't know why I did, I just did it. And she was like, Brandon, get your crazy ass off me and stuff like that. And guess what? We was dating before the end of the summer was over. It was like I had to put the girl in a chokehold, but that's what we do. For some strange reason, we've learned as Black folks that inflicting pain on one another is a form of love. And that is a weird thing that we have to break down and move beyond, because there's other ways to care and show interest besides causing harm to each other. And I think a lot of that comes from slavery, to be honest. It's like I'm a use this pain to keep you in check and to let you know that I see you and that I hear you and things of that nature. But all right, we're gonna wrap up here pretty soon. Any final thoughts? Go ahead, LeVar.
Oh no, just going to put some on that. I kind of grew up on a little bit of a different, because I was very shy, and I didn't really know how to approach women. I didn't really know what to say. I used to be quick to get a girl number, but I got to a position where I really didn't know, what to do. I didn't know my worth. I didn't know how to move, how to operate, because nobody was there to really guide me and teach me. So I grew up a little more different. But going back to that, like, you know, that love, you know, when I left my son's mother, she, you know, she's taught me everything under the sun. And, you know, we had a lot of disagreements and arguments, but she used to be like, you didn't really respond back, or you didn't say nothing back, or you didn't cuss me out back. You must didn't love me. I'm just like, that love? I didn't really understand it. You know what I mean? I used to be like, you jacked up. You know what I mean? You know, if that's love to you, you know, that ain't the way I show love, you know. And I guess, I don't know, I just saw it differently. I don't know if I was a little bit more mature, because my approach to women was kind of like, you know, hey, how you doing? You know, I didn't never really pop in a game. I didn't really get too much aggressive, but I did at the early age. Even think back because I'm about to, you know, lie a little bit because I didn't even remember. I was aggressive on a whole nother way that was much differently. But as a kid, you know, I used to be touching on women, you know, little girls, you know what I mean? When I was younger, you know, and that's my way of showing them I like them, you know, in my own little way. But I didn't really, you know, do anything that was aggressive in a way that's, you know, that my other friends probably did. So it's much differently, I guess, in a sense. But what I was going to get to is, us, the Black people, we feel like we got to win every battle. We feel like we got to win every war. And if we back down, we're punked. You know what I mean?
Yep.
You know, and I think that is a dysfunctionality that, you know, that we have been showing throughout the years. Because my family, they get into it, and it's like the one who says the last word or who hurts the person the most, the one who wins. But actually, you know, you're the one who's losing in a sense. And not even knowing it, you know, because you're really, you know, as a woman showing a masculine side, I'm beating my loved one down harder, but I'm really showing something that I really don't really know what I'm really dealing with. I really don't even know what love really looks like. And right now, our family don't even talk because somebody has said something that was so, you know, dramatic to them to where they haven't talked for the last 5 to 10 years, and they're holding on to that pain. Now I'm becoming the person in the middle, like, I need to go ahead and talk. I need to go ahead and work it out. I don't know. I was always kind of different in a way. But don't get me wrong. I was always ready for a fight. You know, I never back down to a fight. But I was the one who come after the fight if I did something to hurt you. You know what, man? I was wrong. You know, I apologize. Let's make this right. So I had the different dynamic on our family side, so if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. Any final thoughts from either one of you, Aarons, before we wrap up?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that when I met my husband, because he's a big dude, he's like 6'1", and I'm only 4'10", it was like on campus, everybody was like scared of him in college. Mm-hmm. So I remember, like, I'm the type of person, like, I like investigative shows, I like psychology, I like all that stuff. So the more people were telling me about this guy that seemed scary, I was like, I'm about to go see what's up with this. Like, put yourself in danger a little bit. And so I remember when I first met him, everybody called him Devo. And I was like, that's such an ugly name. I hate that name so bad. And like we were just walking from the calf one day, and I was like, what's your real name? And he started cracking up. And I was like, what's so funny? He was like, nobody's ever asked me what my real name was.
Yep.
And I was like, but you got a real name. Your mama didn't name you Devo. You know what I'm saying? Like, he was just like, yeah, my name is Darius. And I was like, man, if I can make this big dude, this big scary dude laugh, like, there's nothing wrong with him. So it was kind of like this whole opening up of like each other in our rooms. Like, we definitely opened up each other's rooms. Like, it was on some, you know, some crazy stuff, but it was also on some like healing stuff too. It was to the point where, like what you guys are saying, when you were younger, it was like, I was the type of person where every relationship that I've ever had was very superficial. Like, I was there and then I was like, ghost, like, I'm out.
Yep.
And I've always been like that. And then when I met my husband, it was kind of like, he was like on some like, you want to be by yourself. And I'm like, no, I don't. Not really deep down inside, I don't want to be by myself. And he's like, yes, you do. You do. It's, you know, you're basically telling the world that you want to be by yourself. And I was like, no, I don't. So I got to do something about this. And so it was kind of like rewiring, like being able to show up and being able to be vulnerable to somebody else. And it was just like, it's just a beautiful thing. It's a painful thing, but it's necessary.
Yeah.
And so it's just, It's just funny because like I always be looking at him like, man, if I had your strength, man, and your build, you know how many people I can knock out. Like these people, when you go down the aisle, like they be scared, they be running, they be like turning their carts around. I can see him. He can't see them because he's not looking at them because he tries to make himself smaller. I don't know if you guys know
I knew it.
But I'd be like, yo, man, if we could do that whole jumping in bodies, I'd be out here talking mess. He's like, that's because you're so small. Yeah, I was like, I'll be out here like, what you say? And so it's just like, I feel like because we're opposites, it's kind of like we help each other with the things that we're not strong in.
Wow. I mean, man, the fact that you were the first person to not ask him what his real name was, I knew that he made himself small right when you said that, because he accepted the container that everybody else felt comfortable with him in. And as Black people, we do this all the time, especially as Black men. And he took on that identity that everybody else put on him to maintain his safety. And for him to be 6'1" and a Black man, he reduces himself physically and mentally all the time to maintain the safety of other people. And when he becomes vulnerable, it's a scary place for him because of the forces and the stimuli of our environments in our society. But I didn't go too deep into that. But yeah,
I just wanted to add too, like his granddad one time, because we've been dating like I think about 6 years at this point, and everybody in his family knew him as Debo too, because he was a ball player and he was really good. And so, you know, I asked his granddaddy, I was like, you know, has Darius changed? He was like, oh yeah, Darius is real different now. And I was getting offended, like, what you trying to say? My husband, like, huh? Like, yeah, right now, like, I'm helping him be better. But it's like, you know, like, I feel like when people come for him because I know how much he's opened up to me and his vulnerability, like, I just want to protect him. You know what I mean? Because he's not that guy, like, that people want him to be. Like, if anything, I'm that person, but it's just like I'm in a different body than him. So everybody sees me very docile and very like, oh, she's not gonna do nothing. But I was like, man, if we could switch, man.
Knocking people out. That's what's up. Thank you for sharing. Aaron, final thoughts from you, sir.
Oh, actually, my final thought is actually a question, and I think it'll be a good way to end it. I've shared the video with a couple of people. I was having some conversations with some people last week that are basically along the same lines, but dealing with family member trauma, all these things, constructive ways to. I don't necessarily know. Maybe this is something you and Sam can get on another broadcast and do. Constructive ways to start having those conversations, or is it an individual place to start? Is everybody starting with themselves individually? And is it even possible to have these conversations in a healthy manner without doing the healing yourself? So I know I might have threw a whole lot into the gumbo pot.
That last question is good. I think to answer your first 2 points, I think that it can be done collectively in that family unit and individually. I would encourage folks to start individually first so that you're better prepared for those family conversations. Because a lot of times your family isn't working on themselves like you are. Mm-hmm. And when you broach the conversation of we need to talk about X, Y, and Z, everybody's going to come at it from a different place. Some people might be down with it. Some people might not. Some people might not even know what the hell you're talking about. Like, wait, what happened in our family? Right. And so you got to be able to kind of manage all that and also understand that everybody's not in the same place as you. So they're going to respond very differently, but be okay with it. Talk, take the conversation as far as it needs to go, and then be okay with wherever it stops, because there should be another opportunity to have that conversation later. And a lot of times what ends up happening is that you're talking about some tough things like sexual abuse in the family, or, somebody getting kicked out when they was 13 and they went and go live with auntie so-and-so. Like, you dealing with some tough stuff that people don't want to hash out. They don't want to bring those old things they swept under the rug back out. So you have to kind of tread lightly on that as best as possible. But I do think that it's possible to have these kind of healing conversations and healing moments in families, but I would encourage people to start their own stuff first and be prepared to allow that conversation to go as far as it needs to in that time. And then also I would say, don't expect that it's going to be quote unquote solved right then and there, because that's the other thing is like, we're going to talk about this because I want to talk about it. And you think stuff's going to be over. And you just opened up a whole nother can of frustration in the family, because now you've unveiled the truth and the problems. Now you got to deal with those moving forward as well. So it's this, again, this is why I say that healing is a journey and not a destination, because now you have to function differently where you're at. And I talked about this. My mom came on the show a couple shows ago, where I said, you know, I told her, I was like, tell them the truth. We don't function like the typical mom and son, but we've healed from a lot of the stuff that happened in the past. So it's okay to function the way that we do. Right. Still love her. She still loves me. I know she's my mom. She knows I'm her son. But we don't have that typical, you know, mother and son relationship. But we've both come to a place where that's okay. What was the third question you had? So I make sure that
I'm old. Don't do that to me, bro. Why are you doing that, man?
You have to play it back. I have to pull it back from the archives. Oh man. All right. Any other questions or thoughts or anything before we wrap it up tonight?
I think I'm good.
I think we're good. Perfect. Well, I'd like to thank the three of you and Brother West for coming on and making this broadcast another success on our healing journey. You know, I can't do this show without folks like you coming in here, being vulnerable, being transparent, telling your truths. This is how we heal, and I hope that we can continue to do this as we move forward. So I appreciate the three of you. I'm going to drop the three of you off, and then I'm going to close out the show. So thank y'all, and I'll see y'all again probably on the next episode or so, or just feel free to stop by whenever you're ready.
Thanks, B.
Yep, thank y'all.
All right, peace now. I appreciate it.
Peace. So there you have it, folks. It's another episode of Ask the Jegna. I'm going to close out with two quotes from the Godfather himself, the legendary Sam Simmons. Make sure you check out the Healing Brothers podcast. I'll drop the link to that YouTube channel. Subscribe to that in the comment sections here on YouTube. And then I'll also share that in the Ask the Jegna page on Facebook. So make sure you check out both of those. So the first quote that I'm going to talk about from Sam is that the pain of the past can blind us to love, but healing can allow us to accept it. So the pain of the past can blind us to love, but healing can allow us to accept it. And one of the biggest obstacles to dealing with our stuff is accepting the painful, the hurtful, the awful things that we've experienced. And when you're able to accept it, doesn't mean you have to like it. But when you're able to accept it, it opens up so many other opportunities to keep moving forward in life. So it's very, very important. Most people are not successful when they go to therapy because they don't want to accept the things that have happened to them. And then the village that hides the truth cannot expect to heal, but to pass on the pain. Again, healing is a journey. When you've embarked on your own healing journey and your own process, you may not be healed from that pain, but you can heal the next generation where they don't experience it, at least from you. So keep that in mind. Keep doing your work. I am Brandon Jones. This is Ask the Jegna. Please share this, share all the content you can, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. And I'll see you all next week. Peace.